All right, welcome to our What Do I Do series, where we are hoping to answer really important questions in a short amount of time. So today I want to talk about fear, because this is maybe what you say, I'm afraid. So what do I do? Because honestly, in life, there's so many things to be fearful of. We could be fearful that our spouse will die. We could be fearful of snakes. We could be fearful that we get this disease or lose our job, or a lot of people are fearful of flying. I have a fear of shots. It was just so random, but it just is. It's like, I don't want to go get a shot. We were talking with a bunch of people about the COVID vaccine, and they're like, are you going to get it? And I said, no, not because I don't think it's a good thing, because I actually do think it's a really good thing. But I said, I just have this fear of shots, of needles. I don't want to go do that. But Jesus said a lot about fear. So we need to learn from him about what we should do with our fears. Here's what he said over and over. Fear not. Fear not. Don't be afraid. But that's really difficult because we live in this really volatile world right now that just seems to be changing so fast. But it's funny because we used to be so worried about terrorism and bombs. And now our country is being attacked by politicians and big tech companies. But there's something in us that just strikes terror into our hearts. But Jesus comes along and says, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. Do not be afraid. And we're like, really, Jesus? Are you not watching what's going on down here? How am I supposed to not be afraid? But if Jesus says it, what if we can actually do that? What if we could actually live with no fear? What if we could live without any fear because we know without a doubt that we're a child of God and that he loves us? That not only are we a child of God and we know he loves us, but we know that every moment of every day he knows exactly where we are. In the car, in the plane, in the restaurant, at the concert. See, what if we were convinced that nothing could or would ever happen that I did not believe full-heartedly that he was in control of? Like, would that help my fear level? And I think it would. Because the more we get to know him, the more we trust him, the less we actually fear about the things in life. Jesus was trying desperately to teach his disciples this same lesson. You don't need to fear. Even if things look really bad, you don't need to be afraid. Luke 8:22 says this: one day Jesus says to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and started out, and as they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. And they were terrified. They were terrified. Look at 24. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. But when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and raging waves, and suddenly the storm stopped, and all was calm. But what happens is he looks at them and he says, where is your faith? And the disciples were terrified and amazed. Now, the reason why they were terrified and amazed was because suddenly they were standing there with somebody who controlled the storm. That in one moment, in one word, everything went calm. And they looked at each other and they said, who is this? Who is this man? They asked each other. When he gives a command, even the wind and waves obey him. In other words, Jesus is saying, what in the world do you have to be fearful about? I'm in control of everything. So what if we really believe that? What if we really believed he could stop the car accident, or could stop the plane crash, or could stop the divorce, or the COVID sickness? What would that do in our lives if we really honestly believed that? And you say, but I do believe it. But the problem is that God did not stop those bad things from happening in my life. But what this shows me is that Jesus controls the storms. He controls it. And what I know is that God is big enough to stop the plane crash, the car crash, the COVID. Like, he can do that. But we also live in a fallen world where bad things do happen. And when they do, and the storms come up, what God is asking us to do is say, I just need you to trust me. Even if bad things happen, I'm still in control, and I still want you to trust me because I'm doing something in the midst of that bad thing. See, Jesus saw that there was no trust from the disciples in the boat, and he's like, why can't you trust me? Why can't you trust and depend on me? Because even when there seems to be something to be terrified about, Jesus is like, I know what's going on. I have a purpose and a plan for everything that's happening. So what if we could really honestly grasp that? Can you imagine what our lives would look like when, let's say, you go to the doctor and then you get a phone call a couple days later and the doctor's like, I really need you to come in. I really need you to come in. We have to talk. Or how about your 16-year-old daughter comes home and says, hey, Mom, remember that like prom a couple months ago that I was kind of out late? Yeah, well, guess what? I'm like pregnant. How about when you get woken up in the middle of the night and the police are on the phone? They're like, you know what, there's been an accident and you need to get to the hospital immediately. What if you walk in one day and your husband's like, I don't love you anymore and I'm leaving you? What if you just lost your job and you're like, hey, I lost my job and we're probably going to lose the house? See, how great would it be in our life if all of those things could happen and we didn't have fear, but instead we had peace? Why? Because we know God. We know that even in the storm, even though Jesus in the storm kind of seemed asleep and not attentive, what we know is that no matter what happens, that God has never lost control of anything in our life, which means every single area of our life. Which brings us to this verse, because here's the point. Luke 12:4 says this, I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. Jesus is saying, in other words, I don't know what you're afraid of. You're afraid of storms, of crashes, of getting sick. You're afraid of things that happen on this earth with our body. But we need to remember that time is short. What Jesus is saying is what we should really be afraid of is what happens after we die. Where are we going to spend eternity? Because our body is just flesh and blood and bones, and we get diseases and we get things, we get cancer cells. But he says, why do you worry about stuff that can just hurt your body? We're all going to die. So what actually comes down to is we're just so fearful of things, and then we're fearful of death. And we say, but what if someone starts shooting at that concert or football game, or what if my plane goes down? And I'm not saying you wouldn't be terrified in the moment, but the ultimate fear goes away because there's really nothing to fear except maybe pain or hurt or heartache, but it's just momentary. See, I hope that's what makes it, is just momentary. It's not forever. That's why we need to focus our relationship on God and start thinking about forever and not just what's here and now on this earth. So how I conquered my fears is I started to just play everything out to the very end. I go, okay, what if I get COVID? Okay. Well, what if I get really sick and I end up in the hospital? Okay. Well, what if I die? Well, you know what? Then I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going. I'll spend eternity in heaven forever. So you go, well, what if your husband leaves you? Well, yeah, that'll be painful. Maybe you have to move. Maybe you'll have to get a job. But eventually you die. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like you think of the worst, you play it to the very, very end. And it always ends up with, eventually you're going to die. So what I do is go, okay, well, then it's not that big of a deal. It's really nothing I should be afraid of today, because I know the outcome as a follower of Jesus is where I go when I die. See, for me, I had to realize we live in a broken world. And I had to realize that our bodies are getting old and tired, and life has its ups and downs. But Jesus promises to walk with us through those dark days with always the hope of eternal life in heaven forever. See, Jesus takes it a step further and tells us, yes, there is one thing we should fear. Not what can hurt the body. But verse 5, but I will warn you whom to fear. Fear the one who, after he is killed, has authority to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you to fear him. The only thing we should fear is God, who controls where we go when we die. And see, if you know where you're going, then you have nothing to fear ever in this life. But if you don't know where you're going and you're like, well, I'm just a good person and my good outweighs my bad and I'm going to go to heaven. You know what? That's not what the Bible says. So I'm hoping today that you'll stop fearing because you come to Jesus. Because no religion will save you. No amount of doing good things will save you. Only Jesus alone will save you and get you that relationship with God that will make your destination heaven instead of hell. See, people can hurt your body and they can hurt your heart, and diseases can attack your body. But when you place your faith and trust in Jesus, you don't have to fear anymore, because life is short and eternity is forever. So I'm going to put a link below here on how to become a Christian if you don't even know what that means. And hopefully this helps you get past your fear. And I hope you have a really good day.